welcome into a special Friday coast-to-coast edition of Beyond the Arc, because I'm Bill Reiter. I'm always in LA. Sam Quinn stepping in today. Normally it's Sam with John on Thursdays, and I have Brad Bakken, but I get a little Brooklyn in my life. Sam, you were on the East Coast, far from the fires here in LA. Welcome in. How's it going, pal?
Bill, it's going well here. I hope it's going okay over there. I mean, the conditions a little bit different for the two of us right now.
Lakers game correctly postponed. Yeah, we're in a good spot. We're in a good spot in LA. Producer Aaron, who's in a different part of LA, is in a good spot. Our thing is the air quality is poor. It's better today. It's looked like a scene from Interstellar outside the last few days, and there's ash everywhere. There's ash at my kid's school. There's ash on the car. There's ash on the basketball courts here. Everything, but we're a lot better off than most people. But the world keeps spinning. Basketball keeps happening. Drama is out there. And so Sam's got a great story we're going to talk about in about 10 or 15 minutes, but you should check it out at cbssports.com. It's basically Sam going full basketball Nostradamus. He looks into the future. He's got future championship teams, future MVPs, the biggest stars to be traded each of the next 5 years. It's a great piece. Check it out. We're also going to hit it. We're going to talk about some teams that have some superstars in the Western Conference and whether we're ready to sell them, write them off yet. Lakers, Warriors, Suns. But let's start with the drama in Florida, the drama with the Heat. As we all know, Jimmy Butler has demanded a trade. He's been suspended by Pat Riley. This is an organization that's certainly dealing with some turmoil. And Riley is famous through his entire tenure and history of being very stubborn, getting sideways with stars. Shaq once went at him in a practice. They had to move him on. Riley went after LeBron James right before LeBron went to Cleveland. Dwayne Wade and Riles had a falling out. And Dan Le Batard, who is, I like Le Batard, Sam. It's not a criticism. It's just context. Le Batard is very close to Pat Riley. Critics of Dan Le Batard would say he carries water for Pat Riley. I don't think that's fair, but he's not exactly someone who's going to come at Riles. But he asked him a tough question on his show. This is it here. And basically, as you'll see, it's prefaced with Riles. People think you might be over the hill.
I don't worry about what critics say because maybe I am. Maybe I should go somewhere and just sort of put my feet up. But I would then become very compulsive, obsessive about doing something else, and you don't want me in that state of mind.
I mean, I don't want to be the jerk, Sam, and I want to go to you first, and I'll give you my view as a guy that's covered this team. I don't care, respectfully, if Pat Riley's obsessed with checkers or online poker or what. That isn't the Heat's problem. If he might be washed, if he might be over the hill, if he's acknowledging that's possible, isn't that a giant problem for Miami?
Bill, I want to turn back the clocks a little bit. Let's go back 8 or 9 years, 2016, 2015, 2017, that range. San Antonio Spurs, as the player empowerment era is really going into full swing, stars asking for trades all the time. The one team we thought was totally immune to all of that were the Spurs, because for 20 years, there was no drama. They just kept winning. They kept winning. They kept winning. We thought, oh, no, this will never happen to them. And then Tim Duncan retires, and all of a sudden, within about a year, 2 years, Kawhi Leonard gets traded. LaMarcus Aldridge asks for a trade. And there are a lot of reasons why those individual trade demands happened. I think a big one was that Greg Popovich, for 20 years, got to coach his team for a certain way because he had Tim Duncan as his star, and he didn't adjust to younger, more modern stars. In a sense, that meant to me Greg Popovich was just a little bit washed. Now, being washed is not an all-encompassing thing. What I do think that meant, though, was that sometimes coaches, GMs, anybody in basketball can get used to a certain era and not change with the times. I bring this up with Pat Riley because a lot of the way that he operates is not very modern, right? Like, how many executives at their end of season press conference are going at their best player the way that he went at Jimmy Butler last year at the end of their season? A lot of the moves they've made are kind of old school, right? Like, you don't usually see teams in the play-in range say, we're going to devote a first-round pick to trade for a Terry Rozier, which is really more of a finishing touch move than a building block move. Their style is very old school. It's very demanding. Obviously, that bears a lot of fruit for them. They're always the best conditioned team in the NBA. They're usually one of the most disciplined in the ways that they play on the court. But I do wonder if the Heat might be falling a little bit behind the times. I don't know why exactly they couldn't seal the deal in the Damian Lillard trade. I think there are a lot of factors there. But I do wonder if they maybe held the line a little bit too strong, as opposed to saying, no, we really do need to get this trade done. If we have to give up more, let's do it. Riley's track record over the last 30 years is impeccable. His track record over the last 2 or 3, not so much. I don't necessarily know if that means he's washed. I would suggest that maybe the Heat need to modernize just a little bit. Bill, I know you've done a lot of reporting around that team. You were there for a while. What do you think?
Yeah, let me give you. So it's so interesting because you're right. His history is remarkable as a coach, as an executive, as a culture builder. Time comes for everybody, and not just players. There's 3 things that sort of occur to me here because I am regularly talking to people in the organization. It's one of those funny things. I covered that team back in the day, and I was really hard on them and LeBron, and they hated me. And then LeBron left, and they hated him so much. It's your enemy's enemy is your friend. So now those Heat guys love me. So it's an irony that isn't lost on me. I think so. Let me give you how the Heat will defend themselves, and then I'll give you two reasons I think he may be washed. He may be, for lack of a better term, the game and the moment, and to your point, the era, the time may have passed him by. The Heat will say, and I've said this before on the show, as it just relates to sort of how they view themselves in a trade situation, but the Heat will say, we have made the Eastern Conference Finals 3 of the last 5 years. We have made an NBA championship 2 of those times. How can we be washed? How can our Heat way be criticized or undervalued if we are consistently competing for championships? That's the Heat sort of defense internally. And I have 2 answers to that. One, I think that I think arrogance can get in your way. And I think one of the huge ironies for Pat Riley is that he is the guy that talked about the disease of more, Sam, as you know, right? Like the more you get, the harder it is to sort of see yourself clearly and hang on to those habits, and arrogance can get in the way. And there are certainly people in the NBA who think that the Heat are arrogant and that they're citing their close calls and their belief in their way means that they're inflexible in how they go about building a team and understanding how the real world works. And to your point about not getting Damian Lillard, that was largely, as I understand it, and most people do, about Joe Cronin, the GM, being put out with the way the Heat said, no, he's coming here, and this is the way it's going to work, and you're going to deal him to us, and we all know it. And Cronin basically came up with a plan that was anywhere but Miami. That was a direct consequence, as I understand it, of the Heat just being arrogant in their negotiations for Damian Lillard. So I think arrogance can play a role. I will say this. This doesn't mean it's true, but 2 or 3 years ago, the Heat internally, there were worries that Riley was not at full capacity, that maybe wasn't as sharp as he used to be, that maybe age had caught up to him or a little bit of complacency. So I know for a fact, Sam, they sort of dismissed it, but it was contemplated internally and talked about around the league a couple years ago that maybe Riles was not the guy that he used to be.
Well, you know what's really interesting there is you think about a lot of the most successful teams in the NBA. The Spurs are the obvious one that comes to mind. Oklahoma City as well.
Such a great example. Yeah.
When they, have this sustained success, teams try to hire off their best people, and suddenly you have a situation where like 5 or 6 of the 30 GMs have Spurs ties or several have Thunder ties. That doesn't really happen to the Heat in the same way. It's a very insular environment. I wonder how much of that organization flows out of Pat Riley's 30-year genius running that team. Like, they have Andy Ellsberg, one of the best cap people in the entire league. You assume Spoelstra is probably going to take on roster control when Riley eventually steps down. There are a lot of people in that organization that everybody really respects. And you can say it's not just Pat Riley. I do find it really interesting that they're not losing people at the same rate. I wonder, is that a statement from the league saying we think it's all Riley, or is that a statement from all of these people saying, no, we don't want to work anywhere else?
I think it's a cult. I guess that comes off as a bad thing. I was going to try to there's a cult-like perspective on Riley with the people internally. And that extended for a long time to Eric Spoelstra, who was vastly underpaid for a while. Remember, there was a sort of almost standoff several years ago, between Spo and Riles over just Spo getting compensation, because Pat Riley thinks that people should just be in awe of Pat Riley. the disease of more that Pat Riley talked about with players applies, I think, to Pat Riley. And it's a great point by you. The lack of people going out, the way that success you would think would require, means there aren't people coming in at the rate that you would think. So you don't have fresh blood. You don't have fresh perspectives. You can become really insulated. And I think that's part of the problem. And I think it's an amazing irony to me that Riley lost LeBron James. And look, is that Riley's fault? I covered that team. And so there's a lot of LeBron was always leaving, in my opinion. And Riles' sort of shots at LeBron in the press conference were more about him having a conniption fit, right? Being a diva about the inevitable that everyone else saw coming that he didn't see coming. That said, LeBron leaving was a breaking point for Pat Riley. It made him bitter, I think. It made that organization angry toward a former player in a way that even with Shaq you didn't see. And I'm amazed, Sam, that they didn't learn from that and understand that you got to manage stars a certain way. Now, is Jimmy Butler LeBron James? No. But remember, Chris Bosh was supposed to carry this team for a long time and unfortunately had the heart condition, had to step away. It was not what they wanted, but there was a sort of plan post-LeBron that they could sort of get behind. I don't know what the plan is without Jimmy Butler, however much they tell me and other people they can win. So that they haven't learned from the LeBron leaving saga and applied those lessons to Jimmy Butler, to me, is much more egregious than actually LeBron leaving.
Bringing up that seeming lack of a plan, it's interesting because if you look at that period right after LeBron left, they were kind of in the wilderness for like 4 or 5 years where they had that Deion Waiters, Kelly Olynyk team where they paid everybody after they went 500, and they were kind of just mediocre for a little while. They didn't quite know what they were doing. Jimmy Butler really saved them from a period of long-term irrelevance. I look at this now, and I hear that the Heat are really committed, like, no, we think we can still win. If we trade Jimmy, we want to get win-now stuff back. Like, we think we can hang with the Celtics. They can't. We think we can hang with the Cavs. They can't. And I almost wonder, like, is it in your organization's best interest to have somebody running the team who's thinking this way? Like, maybe forget about the fact that Pat Riley is like 80 and probably nearing the end of his career one way or another. Do you want somebody in that seat who has a longer view on this? Because if I were running the Heat right now, my view would be, let's trade Jimmy Butler for as much draft capital as humanly possible. Not because I want to go into a tank, but because I want to be ready to turn around and take that stuff and trade it for whoever the next guy who wants to come to Miami is.
They don't think that. They don't say, I'm sorry to jump in. It's a great call. I can just tell you my conversations with them, and it may be delusional, but I don't want to call sources delusional. They think that they're a contender today to come out of the East in the finals. You're right. They're just, and this is where he may be washed. Maybe they're not operating in reality. We're going to keep this conversation going. And Sam's insights has sparked for me a thought on how a rom-com paradigm might explain Riley having been able to cover up, having been washed for several years. So we're going to hit that and Sam's outstanding story on the future when we come back in just a moment here. Don't go anywhere on Beyond the Arc. All right, the Heat are going to be so mad at me next time I call them. Welcome back into Beyond the Arc. I'm Bill Reiter. He is Sam Quinn. Please remember to hit the like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching or listening on YouTube, thank you for doing that. You can hit the little notifications button so you always know when me and John and Sam and Brad Botkin are doing our thing. Sam, you made me think that you were saying something like sparked a thought. Sometimes we don't realize when, especially people in the front office, because it's harder to assess day-to-day what they're doing. Easiest to assess players, maybe next easiest to assess a coach. Front office people operate in the shadows, and it's hard to have all the info. I wonder if, you know how in like there are these rom-coms where two damaged people find each other and it's magical? I'm thinking of Punch Drunk Love. You're probably too young for that, where Adam Sandler, I can't remember which hot actress it was, right? He's a weirdo, and she's kind of off, and they find each other. I wonder if maybe the last several years of the Heat and the success they cite as proof that Riles knows what he's doing. was actually a damaged Jimmy Butler. Guy can win, but couldn't get along with anybody. Finding a damaged Pat Riley, really smart, but alienated everybody on earth. Socially awkward in this analogy. I'm stretching to the breaking point. And they found each other, and it worked for a while, and they were each sort of each other's last chance to make it work. And then they had their inevitable falling out. And when Jimmy leaves, I'm not sure there's another person out there at that talent level in this modern NBA that's going to let Pat Riley treat them or bring them into a culture the way that he's built it for years, because he's not going to adapt.
Bill, this is a brilliant analogy, because as I think about it, what went wrong for Jimmy Butler in Minnesota? Obviously, the biggest thing was contractual, whatever, that's its own thing. He is having contract issues with the Heat now. But the other thing that really came up as he was forcing his way out of there was like, he looked at these young guys in Minnesota and Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, and there was sort of a vibe of like, oh, I can't win with them. They're not serious about it. I feel like if Pat Riley had been the GM of that team, Pat would have been going at Towns and Wiggins the way he went at Butler, and Butler from off on the side would have been like, yeah, this is great. Like, there's clearly some connection between these two sides that wouldn't exist on other teams, right? Like, Jimmy is such a competitive maniac that being with a GM who's willing to go at guys and like be honest and, you know, have that sort of attitude, I can see how that would fit, but it would also be very, very grating. And that's what happens when you have these, you know, big personalities on the same side for 5 years. If it doesn't lead to a championship, eventually they're going to go at each other. So this is a great analogy, Bill. Great work.
Yeah, I think we'll close here. I hope Riles isn't washed, but it is hard for people to move on when they're one of the best in the history of whatever they do for a living. And I know Heat people, if you're watching, that you've made a bunch of Eastern Conference finals and 2 finals in the last 5 years. It just feels like you've been doing this barely getting in and making these long shot runs. It might be time for a fresh voice, maybe for someone like Eric Spoelstra to have a lot more control than they've had. Sam, I want to get into your story at CBSSports.com, because I love this stuff, and I love that you had the guts to put your name on predictions 5 years out. So if you haven't seen this, it's every champion. It's the best player to be traded each of the next 5 years. It's the MVP. Who's going to win the MVP? Can I just read these? Can I just read these off real quick? And all right. So his champions for the next 5 years. This year's is the Cleveland Cavaliers, which I love so much.
Good.
It does look good. He's got the Thunder in 26 and 27. Then you got, this is bold. This is guts. A team that has not been a top 20 offense in, I don't know, I think it's 8,900 years. The Orlando Magic. And then, and I love this one, the San Antonio Spurs in 2029. He doesn't have beyond that, but I'll just add 30 to 38. Also the Spurs because of Wembanyama. So defend your Magic take here, because I love the Orlando optimism.
So a lot of this was based around the idea that we've now had 6 different champions in the last 6 years. There was a part of me that wanted to just pick the Thunder every year, right? Like, you theoretically could. I ultimately came at it. Now, I wrote this before the Thunder played the Cavs on Wednesday. Right now, I'm feeling pretty good about picking the Cavs. I think, let's take the Cavs, who've been the best team so far this year, sneak them in, make it 7 for 7, and then, quote unquote, the mini Thunder dynasty, which is in this day and age, 2 in a row is, worth 4 in a row in the past, given where the NBA is now. I didn't want to give them 3 in a row, just given where the NBA is. I look at Orlando, and later in the piece, another thing I did was breakout players, breakout groups, et cetera, et cetera. I look at Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner very similarly to the way I looked at Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown several years ago.
That's a good
My logic here is statistically, those guys are pretty close to where Tatum and Brown were. I think the cycle is going to be pretty similar, where they're going to go through several playoff runs, and they're going to go through narratives of, oh, are these guys too similar? Do you have to break them up? I love the culture they're building in Orlando, that defense-first attitude. They have all of their own future first-round picks. They have all of the role players they need. The one thing that team needs to really be championship viable is like a traditional offensive-minded guard. I think they can get that guy, especially because with Wagner and Banchero, they don't need somebody who's going to be like a top 10 player in the league. The guy I keep advocating for them to get is Anthony Simons, right? Who's like never been an all-star, and may never be an all-star. They just need somebody who can come in, handle the ball a little bit, shoot a bunch of threes, and fit alongside those guys. If you get that kind of player, I don't know what they lack. So basically, my prediction there is I think they're going to find their offensive guard. They're really young. By 2028, they're going to be in their primes, and the Thunder aren't going to win three in a row just because I don't think anybody can win 3 in a row in this day and age. So that's how I landed on the Magic. I didn't think the Spurs were ready. I'm kind of with you, though. When we get to the 2030s, Victor might just be winning 6, 7, 8, whatever the number is.
Yeah, all these might be him. MVP in Sam Quinn's projected future. He's basically guessing the future here. This year's MVP, Shea, that SGA makes obviously a ton of sense for a lot of reasons. Okay, 2026, Luka Doncic. I want to put a bookmark on that. I have a thought on finally Sam believes Luka gets his MVP. 27, Wembanyama. 28, Wembanyama. 29, got to pick somebody else. So I guess it's Anthony Edwards, right? Because you can't give him all. Let me just do this on Luka real quick, because I was thinking about this before I read your story. Luka Doncic is obviously a remarkable basketball player, and along with Kyrie, made an NBA Finals last year. If he doesn't get an MVP soon, he's not going to get one, because you're going to have Wembanyama and you're going to have other players that are coming up, and you're just going to. If he doesn't win an MVP, is he the best player in history not to win one? Is he in that conversation?
I kind of think, yeah. I mean, statistically, certainly.
Right?
I don't know if he quite has the resume. I mean, who are the best players ever to win MVP?
Yeah,
I think Elgin Baylor
up.
comes up a fair bit.
Yep.
Yep. I think certainly statistically, there aren't other players like him statistically, right? It's like he's putting up numbers that are like Larry Bird numbers, that are like guys who are winning 2, 3, 4 MVP numbers. I thought this year, coming into the year, was like the obvious sweet spot, right? Because MVP tends to operate on a pretty strict rule set. Like, I know we want to say every year, like, oh, this guy's going to win, that guy's going to win. Coming into the year, it's usually your age 24 to 28. It's a very small age range. Like, Jokic is aging out, Giannis is aging out, Embiid had aged out. And it's guys who are first or second team All-NBA the previous year. So I think coming into this year, I was looking at it, it was Tatum, Brunson, and Luka. And that was basically it. Then he got hurt, and he's not going to play 65 games, and he's out. I sort of think there's going to be a tie goes to Luka element, maybe not
100%
specifically,
100%.
But in the near future, because there's going to be a sense that, man, if we let Victor start his run and Luka doesn't have one yet, I don't know when he's going to get it, because statistically he's been more than MVP caliber. So I stuck him in there before Wembanyama's run starts in 27. Now, 2029 rolls around. I don't know if you remember last year's MVP race, but it got pretty toxic when Jokic was trying to win 3 in a row, or 2 years ago, excuse me. I don't think the voters are ever going to let anybody win 3 in a row after what happened to Jokic.
If anybody, it's Wemby. It's Wemby.
We can look at Wemby in a way that we didn't look at Jokic, where we said, oh, LeBron didn't do it, MJ didn't do it. Maybe we could look at Victor, especially a few years down the line, and say, like, he is their successor. Let's reward him in a way that we didn't reward LeBron or MJ. Like, he is the next face of the league in a way that I don't think people want to do for Jokic. But historically speaking, I'm just not going to pick 3 straight MVPs.
No, it's the right call. And by the way, it depends where they land. He can win one without them being the top team in the West. But as he racks them up, if Denver had the best record in the NBA, I think it'd be a harder thing for people to block Nikola, because he's won a bunch. Producer Aaron's put together a list for us. Jerry West is the best player to never win an MVP. Isaiah Thomas came to mind. So this is interesting. Here are the other names that he's got. Elgin Baylor, D. Wade. I think Isaiah Thomas. I'm also friends with Isaiah Thomas, so I'm biased. I think he's grossly underrated. Pippen, CP3, Stockton, Rick Barry, Pat Ewing. Who's the best player on that list that's not Jerry West? I think it's Isaiah Thomas is my first.
The peak
reaction.
is Kawhi. I think
Kawhi's a good one.
Like, the version of him that was winning the title in Toronto or almost won MVP with the Spurs.
Yeah, it's a good one.
He had an MVP caliber year in, I think it was 2017.
But he's been a
triple-double
He's been a multi-time finals MVP, so I think it offsets it a little bit.
Right.
legacy. I mean, he hasn't won the regular
Can I
season.
put out Chris Paul, not necessarily because I think he's the best player on this list, but because Kobe stole his MVP in 2008? Can we have that conversation?
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, I think Steve Nash stole Kobe's MVP a few years earlier.
Right, Steve has 2.
That was sort of, I think Steve Nash should have won. I think the way that cycle should have gone, Nash should have won the first one when they were, like, when the Suns really broke out. Then Kobe should have won the next year when he averaged 35. And then Chris Paul, the year the Hornets then, almost had the number 1 seed with, like, David West and Tyson Chandler as the 2 best players on the team. That should have been Chris Paul's. He didn't win one, and he never got his makeup trophy in the way that Kobe did.
Right.
So I feel for him. Rick Barry is, like, I feel a very underappreciated historic player because he wasn't really playing on great teams. Now, I don't know if that means he stacks up to Isaiah and to Kawhi and Jerry West.
Let me roll for Isaiah real quick. I just don't think this gets appreciated enough because everybody hates Isaiah. He won back-to-back championships between the Lakers, Celtics, Bird Magic dynasty and the rise of Jordan. I mean, that is, to me, it's one of the underappreciated runs in NBA history because that is not easy. That is not easy to do. And I know he doesn't, like, statistically didn't put up the same sort of stats we'd expect today, but I watched those teams because I'm old enough. I mean, he was so good and important to what they did back then.
Isaiah's maybe statistically, like, the single player who the numbers don't capture his impact most. I think it's Isaiah and Kevin Garnett are the two where it's like, if they were in a different era or a different team setting or whatever, like, Isaiah played in an era where there was no space, so he wasn't going to rack up assists in the ways that modern point guards did. I think if he played in the modern era, his assist numbers would be really gaudy, and we talk about him the way we talk about Chris Paul. And he wasn't going to score a lot because he was 6'0" in an era where you had to be either Michael Jordan or a center to score a lot of points. Like, he was not in an era that was going to be statistically favorable to him. So we've really tended to underrate him. Winning those 2 titles at, like, not necessarily the peak of Bird Magic MJ, but at a point in which Bird Magic MJ were all viable title contenders, like, that should say a lot more than it does. I don't know that I'd pick him over Jerry West. I don't know that I would pick him over Pete Kawhi Leonard.
Over Jerry.
But he is much higher on this list than he's going to get credit for.
Man, what Kawhi Leonard was is amazing, and what he didn't become, I also think is there was a stretch there where Kawhi had an opportunity to be a top 5 player of all time. I mean, it's easy to forget that. Yeah.
With that 2019-20 season, his first year with the Clippers, LeBron was still, like, mostly LeBron. He had that one injury season his first year with Lakers, but, like, LeBron was still close to peak of his powers, and we spent that whole season saying Kawhi was better. Like, how many guys has that ever been true of? To say, like, we're going into a season thinking he's better than LeBron.
Kawhi went to the Clippers with an opportunity, he didn't do it, to, instead of LeBron, be the first and only player in NBA history to be a finals MVP with 3 different teams. And it felt not inevitable, but very, very likely because he'd just come off that win with the Raptors, was going to the Clippers, paired up with Paul George, right? Like, this is, like, look at this. Like, and then he just, injury and everything else, just his career fell off a cliff.
Yeah, he's the best perimeter defender of all time, I think, in my opinion. I think there's a small list that he'd be on at the very least. Yeah. By the end in San Antonio and that one Toronto year, he had grown into, like, one of the most efficient one-on-one scorers the NBA had ever seen as well. Like, it's a shame we didn't get the version of Kawhi's career where he had 5, 6, 7 straight really healthy years on great teams, because there's another version of this career where, like, say he stays in Toronto and he stays healthy and he wins 2 or 3 titles with the Raptors with that quietly loaded team, we look at his career entirely differently.
Yeah, there's an alternate universe where the LeBron-Steph conversation is a LeBron-Steph-Kawhi conversation, and maybe in a different – I love the alternate universe conversation – and maybe in a different order. All right, very, very quickly, because I want to get to this. Who are the 5 breakout players of the next 5 years on your list? And who is the one, just real quick, who is the one you're the most confident about?
Okay, so I went through there were different tiers to this, right? Like, I wrote Mark Williams as somebody who I think is going to grow into, like, a low-level all-star guy. I don't think fans are too familiar with Mark Williams yet. I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on guys like that. The one that I really want to, like, plant my flag in,
Okay.
I think Cade Cunningham is going to be an MVP candidate by the end of this 5-year window. I am all the way in on Cade Cunningham. He does everything for the Pistons. Like, the Pistons are over 500. Have you looked at that roster lately?
It's amazing.
Like,
It's
who
amazing.
else is on that team?
It's amazing.
I mean, he has very, very little space. Like, he's still on a team where if you look at the guys they've invested in, Ron Holland, top 5 pick, Asar Thompson, top 5 pick, like Tobias Harris is now with Jaden Ivey out, the second scorer on that team. Like, there's so little talent, and he's lifting them to such a degree. I really trust Trajan Langdon as the head basketball decision maker for that team. I think a few years from now, that roster is going to be maybe not loaded, but like normal. I look at the arc that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander went on in Oklahoma City, where it felt like every year we kind of raised the bar a little bit, where he gets there and it's like, oh, okay, he could be like a nice, foundational piece for them. Oh, no, now he's an all-star. Oh, no, now he's not an all-NBA candidate. Now he's an MVP candidate. Like, I sort of feel we're going to head on that trajectory with Cade. He's not an elite athlete. That's the one thing he doesn't have. But the size, the craft, the IQ, I just think if you surround that guy with better players, he is going to absolutely soar.
Since I brought up alternate universes as we break here, let me just make another case. We're in a simulation, maybe, and they're bleeping with us because Tobias Harris leaves Philly to go to Detroit, and they are on track to have a better season than the Sixers with Embiid and George. I mean, everybody's hurt, obviously, but that whole core.
Tobias was right.
All right, like Tobias, somebody out there is messing with us. All right, we're going to very quickly get into 3 star-studded teams in the Western Conference who had, at least internally, massive expectations that are not being met. And we'll see if Samurai want to throw 1 or 2 or 3 overboard. And then we'll do Team of the Night next year on Beyond the Arc. Okay, that's quick. Welcome back. Beyond the Arc, we're back. Bill Reiter, Sam Quinn. Please remember to subscribe, like, give a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, we're live on YouTube 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, right at and around noon Eastern time. You can hit that little alert button, and they'll let you know when John or me or Brad or Sam are hanging out talking some hoops. Sam, the Suns, I don't think any of us had expectations massive for the Suns, but Matt Ishbia did. Internally, they thought they were going to be really good. A lot of people had expectations for the Lakers. I had them outside of my play-in at the start of the year with these predictions we had to do. And there were the Warriors, who I thought were going to be really, really good, who have obviously underwhelmed. We're not quite at the halfway point, but do you want to just cash in on the it's over, they're finished with any of these teams?
I mean, I think you could do it to varying levels with any of them. I want to start with the Suns, who, I have already dug the grave. I'm pointing at the headstone like, guys, you ready to jump in? The people who are saying, oh, maybe they can get Jimmy Butler, or maybe they could trade for this guy and improve their defense in this way. It's not a singular problem. I just want to point out their offense has been ranked 9th, 10th, 11th for most of this year. It's been low end top 10. That was supposed to be their superpower, right? They were supposed to have Booker, Beal, Durant, and outscore teams to such a degree that these other problems weren't going to matter. Yeah, they do need rim protection. Yeah, they do need a perimeter defender. But none of that matters if the core concept of your team doesn't work. And I look at that team and I say, what we should have known at the time was that Booker, Beal, and Durant just do nothing to amplify each other. They all have the same exact skill set, right? Among offensive superstars, there's really a spectrum. You have guys who are tough shot makers, and you have guys who are advantage creators. You want, if you're going to build a team around these guys, to have a little bit of both. Durant, Booker, and Beal don't really create advantages, right? They don't really warp defenses. They don't have this insane gravity that they can use to create easy shots elsewhere on the court. They're more just no, I'm going to take shots that guys make at low percentages and make them at pretty good percentages. If you have 3 guys like that, what it turns into is just, we're going to be a team that takes bad shots and make them medium shots. You don't win a title that way. So, I'm sorry, sure. Could they get another rim protector? Yeah, maybe. I doubt it, but maybe they do turn Nurkic into a decent center. Maybe they even get Jimmy Butler. But, the core concept of this team is just flawed.
Yeah, look, I thought the Suns would be better. I thought that they would be serviceably 5, 6, or 7 in the Western Conference, and then do what they did last year, which is be underwhelming in the playoffs, because over 7 games, for all the reasons you're talking about, it is really easy to scheme up against these guys and limit what they do, and their ceiling, I think, is pretty low. For me, the team that I really doubted was the Lakers. They've been a lot better than I thought they were going to be. I had them on the outside of the play-in. In fairness, 5 to 11, and I was really high on the Spurs, so you can go 11 or 12, is really close. I mean, there's not that much of a difference between some of these, certainly 11, some of these teams. And they've lost a couple in a row now. I'm still low on LA. And some of my equation here, some of my sort of arithmetic, Sam, was the likelihood that at 40 LeBron would be healthy the whole way through, and just the likelihood Anthony Davis would be healthy all the way through, even though AD's been more durable. I thought that was part of the factor. They've been out there. They've been largely playing. And to me, they still don't look they're not that good. There's no ceiling there to me.
No,
they can't make the conference finals.
I completely agree. I think I had them 10th coming into
yeah.
I was broadly with you that I was on the lower end expectations for them. Now, they've had LeBron on the court for most of the year.
Right.
I do still think that they've really felt the impact of LeBron being 40, because if you watch that team play, they kind of all have the attitude that they're 40, right? Like, LeBron has to pace himself just for physical reasons, right? Like, he can't play all out for 40 minutes when he's 40 years old. I watch that team and I just see the attitude they play with a lot of the time. And it's just like, guys, you aren't all 40. You understand that, right? Like, you're jogging through a half against this Mavericks team on, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, that has no Luka, no Kyrie, and you're letting them hang around, and all of a sudden they've made a million threes, and it's like, well, I guess we just wasted this opportunity for a free win against a bad team. There are just way too many games like that where there's no sense of urgency, or the effort isn't where it needs to be. I think if you had the perfect group of role players around 40-year-old LeBron and 31-year-old now AD, I think you could still be very, very good. If they had that 2020 team that was just all wings and length and athleticism, I think that could still work pretty well right about now. This current roster, Austin Reeves has grown into a totally viable secondary creator on offense. After that, your defense isn't where it needs to be. Your shooting isn't where it needs to be. The roster just isn't very good.
No, it's not. And then lastly, I'm holding. I think this is just what I want to be true instead of what I believe to be true. But whatever. I'm holding on to hope that the Warriors can keep their head afloat, maybe make a trade, get a continued better version of Andrew Wiggins. I love Steph, and if any of these, I don't think any of these teams are dangerous. But if you said I have to believe in one of these teams, the Suns, the Lakers, the Warriors, to go the deepest in the playoffs, I'm probably taking Golden State as my choice.
I am too. Now, with the Lakers and with the Suns, I can at least point to their stars and be like, there's a little bit of blame here. I think LeBron is to some extent to blame for some of the culture issues in LA right now. I think Durant and Booker and Beal certainly share their share of the blame in Phoenix. Stephen Curry has done nothing wrong. I'm sorry, he has not done a thing wrong. He is still playing it relatively close to normal Steph levels. He's not playing as many minutes. Usage isn't as high. But other than that, he still mostly looks like Stephen Curry. Draymond mostly looks like Draymond Green. The rest of the team around them is just kind of a mess. None of this is their fault. If you had a better group of supporting players around them, and ideally another star, I don't know if I would say they can win the championship, but if they had Jimmy Butler, would you want to play them if you were Memphis or Houston? I wouldn't.
No. All right, so let me ask you, we got to get the team of the night, but this is a soft spot. Producer Aaron is a Warriors fan, and with a burning emotional passion, hates Steve Kerr as a coach, not as a person. John Gonzalez thinks Steve Kerr walks on water. So, and I'm kind of amused by where do you come down on, because when you are coaching one of the best of all time, you get a lot of shine that doesn't belong to you. Had a few things gone a few other ways, David Blatt's a champion and probably has a reputation he does not deserve. Are you on the closer to Steve Kerr as a genius as a coach, or closer to he's very fortunate that Steph Curry is the player he's gotten to coach?
It's a spectrum. I lean more towards the Steve Kerr is great element of it. Okay. I think people have forgotten just where that team was when he took it over, Mark Jackson was running an offense that ranked 30th in passes per game when they had Stephen Curry, right? Like, that's nuts. Draymond Green was playing shooting guard before Steve Kerr got there. Like, it's easy to look at what they've become and say, oh, this was inevitable. No, Mark Jackson was using Stephen Curry as like a normal high usage point guard. He was using Klay Thompson in isolations. The system that Steve Kerr devised was not traditional in any way, shape, or form. And I think it's unlocked the players that this team has had to a degree that most coaches couldn't. Like, how many coaches are thinking, yeah, let's start Draymond Green and switch everything and like start a defensive revolution? If you look at some of his playoff adjustments, the let's put Andrew Bogut on Tony Allen thing that they did against Memphis in 2015, that is not like, now it looks like, oh, that's the sort of adjustment that any coach would make. Steve Kerr was first. Oh, let's start Draymond Green at center and get rid of Andrew Bogut in the 2015 finals when we're down 2-1. Now, oh, in hindsight, it looks great. At the time, it was a totally innovative thing. I think a lot of the problems that people have with Steve Kerr is that they want the Warriors to be normal. They want Steph to run 40 pick and rolls a game and just have everything flow out of that for them to play the way that a team with a normal guard of that ilk would play. They don't, and that's part of what has made them special. Now, are there issues that come out of that? Absolutely. Like, I think Kumbaya Kerr playing Anderson Varejao in Game 7 of the 2016 finals probably cost them a championship. There were a few things in that vein where I look at it and say, maybe a normal coach would have done this better, but on balance over the course of a decade, I think winning 4 championships is not an accident. And it's not just the players that they had. It's that Steve Kerr built an environment in which those players could reach the level that they have.
Producer Aaron, I'll speak for him. He doesn't agree. It's such an irrational. I love it. All right, team of the night. Before we sign off, I'll let you go first. Who's your team of the night?
Give me the Dallas Mavericks, who've now won 2 in a row without Luka and Kyrie. They're just trying to hang on for dear life right now. They'd lost, I believe, 4 or 5 in a row before that Laker game. The name of the game right now is just tread water. And they did that. They beat a team in Portland that they should have beaten. They got the hard, quote unquote, the hard win against the Lakers the other night. Like, I just continue to be a real believer in this supporting cast. I think they're the second best team in the West when they're healthy, and good on them for, like, just righting the ship a little bit, racking up wins that are going to be very important when Luka and Kyrie get back.
I'm going to go with the Cleveland Cavaliers with a bit of a warning for Cleveland.
We could pick the Cavs every night.
Yeah, you could take the Cavs every night. They get to 12 in a row. They barely beat the Raptors last night. I watched that game. I can't remember who they were playing. They barely beat the Raptors. Here's what I'll say. The more that you establish that you are actually to be taken seriously, and obviously beating the Thunder the other night is a big moment for just people, I think, to give Cleveland the respect they deserve. The more you're going to get people's best shot, the more you're going to live with these expectations. It's one thing to be the underappreciated overachiever. It's another thing to be one of the big dogs. And I'm not saying they can't do it, Sam. I'm just saying, back to Pat Riley, that disease of more, the further up you go on whatever you're chasing, the further up the mountain, the thinner the air gets. And so just, they're great. They're outstanding. You can have a letdown against the Thunder. Still won the game. Just be leery. Just be aware that what I think Cleveland has to do is just maintain what's got them here and not lose sight of that. They are, for me, the best team in the NBA, and they must be for you, because in your outstanding prediction story, you have them as the champion in this upcoming 2025 season. By the way, if you missed that, check it out at cbssports.com. Thank you for listening to the show. We're here every Monday to Friday on YouTube, noon Eastern. Remember, go to our YouTube page and click on the little bell, the little notifications button. So it just ding, ding, ding. It'll tell you when we're live. Please subscribe, leave positive comments or any comments you want to. Thank you as always for listening. Sam, have a great weekend, pal. Congratulations on being in Brooklyn, by the way, I'm in LA. There is smoke coming into the room that I'm sitting in.
I was going to say, Bill, stay safe. I don't know what's going on over there, but
it's mask time.
Just whatever you got to do to take care of yourself.
We're in the same spot. It's just very smoky. All right. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you. We'll see you, John and I, back here Monday on Beyond the Arc.